Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. I want to talk today about your freedom to express your opinions publicly without fear of, being dragged before a Human Rights Tribunal somewhere in Canada, and also freedom from the government and their overreach, which we see a lot these days, okay? So before we jump in, quick reminder to hit subscribe and tell your friends about us. Our guest today joining us from Calgary, John Carpay. He's the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. Their website is jccf.ca. He's also the author of a book called Corrupted by Fear. Highly recommend taking a look at that book. All right, you can get that at Amazon. So, John, good to have you with us again.
So glad to be with you, Paul, and with your viewers and listeners.
You bet. Hey, you know what? Before we dive in, why don't you put a quick plug in for the Justice Center for any viewers who might not be familiar with what you do. I mean, you're always fighting for freedom somewhere in Canada for individuals, organizations, and so forth.
So we are a registered charity. We have a team of lawyers all across Canada fighting to defend the freedoms of expression, conscience, religion, association, peaceful assembly. And we are funded 100% by voluntary donations from Canadians. We issue official tax receipts. And our website, as you mentioned, for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is jccf, F as in freedoms.ca. And visit our website to see all of our cases. And you can also sign up for a free email newsletter that we send out only once or twice a month. Yeah,
it's good to be in contact with you folks, keeping us up to date on all the different battles going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in Canada. There sure is. Well, why don't we start with Canadian writer Megan Murphy. You're funding some lawyers who are representing her. And this is, she's had multiple human rights complaints filed against her by transgender activist Jessica Simpson, who's been at this for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of cases involving Jessica Simpson here, including the Western Standard media outlet, and I think there's a few others as well. Do you want to just tell us a bit about what's going on there?
Well, Jessica Simpson used to be known as Jonathan Yaniv, who became famous about 8 years ago when Jonathan Yaniv filed human rights complaints against women who refused to provide Yaniv with a Brazilian bikini wax for Yaniv's male genitalia. And Yaniv filed these human rights complaints and said that there was discrimination based on gender identity, gender expression. These women had an awful time finding law firms to help them to defend themselves against Yaniv's complaints. The law firms were scared of being called transphobic.
Right.
So the Justice Center stepped in and provided lawyers for these women, and Yaniv's discrimination complaint was dismissed.
Okay.
Fast forward a few years, Jonathan Yaniv became Jessica Simpson, applied to enter the Galaxy Beauty pageant in Ontario while probably still possessing male genitalia. We're not sure. Beauty pageant said women only. Jessica Simpson filed a discrimination complaint, which was dismissed. So now we have Jessica Simpson filing human rights complaints against Megan Murphy, who is a podcaster, journalist with Feminist Current, and over misgendering, because Megan Murphy referred to Jessica Simpson as he and him, as has done the Western Standard, Dallas Brody, member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. Complaints have also been filed against Barbara Kay of the National Post, Ezra Levant of The Rebel, on and on and on. And so now the Justice Center is providing lawyers to Megan Murphy and Dallas Brody and the Western Standard and potentially other people to defend against these new human rights complaints filed by Jessica Simpson over misgendering.
So, I mean, what does the law say in Canada? I mean, is it illegal to voice your opinion publicly, particularly, I guess, in social media, that you believe that biological males cannot become female? Okay, so we have differing opinions on this. Now, yes, somebody's feelings are probably going to get hurt on this side or that side of the debate, but is that currently illegal in Canada?
it is legal for somebody to assert the opinion that it's impossible for a man to become a woman, and it's impossible for a woman to become a man. There are only two sexes. All of these things are still legal to say, although if we're not vigilant, even that freedom might disappear. What is illegal is to misgender somebody. So, which is kind of unfair, because it's like if somebody said that they were a really devout Christian and they really identified as a devout Christian, but then, other people have the freedom to look at that person and say, well, I don't think so. I don't think you're a devout Christian. And they can express, they don't have to agree with it just because somebody identifies strongly. And that's the way it should be, right? If somebody says they're a devout Christian, okay, great. But other people should not be forced to say, yes, that person's a devout Christian. We still have a freedom of expression, freedom to have our own opinion. Now, with the gender stuff, unfortunately, if a man says that he identifies as a woman and he is a woman, legally, if you don't call that man by she and her, then you could get a human rights complaint filed against you. Ultimately, the problem is these provincial human rights laws actually allow the Human Rights Commissions to police our speech. And we should just repeal those provisions. We could still have human rights legislation in place to prohibit discrimination, but pull out the parts in every province, pull out the section that empowers them to regulate speech.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we follow that through to its logical conclusion, if I self-identify as Indigenous, then by the same logic, the government should give me all the rights that fall upon Indigenous peoples, whether there's certain tax benefits or payouts, et cetera, from various treaty agreements. I identify as such, so therefore I am. Just like, again, gendering somebody. I mean, is that not logical, or did I miss something?
Oh, it should be the same thing. And yet somehow I would venture a guess that if you said you really identified as Indigenous, I don't think they're going to give you your treaty card on that basis. Nor do I think that in British Columbia, the Human Rights Commission ordered former Chilliwack School Board trustee Barry Neufeld to pay $750,000 to some gay teachers in Chilliwack who felt offended by Barry Neufeld saying that children should not be subjected in the classroom to transgender ideology. We should not be telling 5-year-old Johnny that he might be a girl, that he could become a girl. And just for expressing his political opinions, the Human Rights Commission has punished him to the tune of $750,000. Now, you could be upset with the commission, but that's not the root problem. Is they have a law on the books that allows these political activists to punish the speech that they disagree with.
Is that a federal law then, or provincial?
It's provincial. So BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and most provinces in Canada have a provision that allows the Provincial Human Rights Commission to go after people over things like misgendering, or somebody that makes, it does not want to wave the rainbow flag and endorse this rainbow flag ideology. You can get in trouble for not endorsing it. So federally, we used to have that provision. The Harper government got rid of it, and now the Liberals are talking about bringing it back. But right now, it's only provincial.
Well, I mean, to me, that's kind of scary. Wow.
Even in Alberta, I should point out, Alberta reputation for being the most freedom-loving province in Canada. And there's a woman right now that the Justice Center's funding legal representation. She publicly criticized a family-friendly drag queen event and said, by definition, this is a drag queen event is not family-friendly, period.
Right.
She publicly criticized it. Now she has to defend herself against a human rights complaint for publicly criticizing a drag queen, children's story event. This is in Alberta.
Yeah, I think the majority, frankly, Albertans and folks in BC would I mean, they'd see things the same way. They'd say, well, hold on a second. We don't want to sexualize our children, whether that's in the classroom with a SOGI curriculum, these kinds of things, right? Most voters would say, well, yeah, no, we don't want this in our classrooms. If you want to do that in your own time as parents, that's up to you, I guess. But here we are weaponizing our human rights tribunals, and the average person who just wants to express an opinion, they're not forcing it on anybody. So somebody's feelings get hurt, and this now by law is we can sue people, etc. That's a scary place to be in. So something needs to change there. And again, with our human rights tribunals, who appoints these folks? If we had it sounds like they're very activist. This doesn't sound like an objective, rational decision here.
It's a provincial government that appoints it. So in Alberta, it would be. I don't think that Danielle Smith personally,
right,
does this herself, but it's the Alberta government generally will appoint people to these commissions. But I think the solution. Yes, you can always appoint better people, and we should. However, what Alberta could do very simply is repeal Section 3 of the Alberta Human Rights Act, which empowers the Human Rights Commission to prosecute Albertans over politically incorrect speech. In British Columbia, a government, I don't think the current NDP government would do it, but
right,
a government in British Columbia could repeal Section 7 of the British Columbia human rights legislation, which empowers the commission to prosecute people over peacefully expressing their politically incorrect opinions. So, and it's not that hard to do. You bring a bill and the bill says, Section 3 of the Alberta Human Rights Act will be repealed. And there you go. You vote on it and that section's repealed. And now we have human rights laws that still prohibit discrimination, but none of this garbage of going after people over what they say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know, and I guess that's something you can bring up next time you meet with your MLA, for viewers watching. Okay, let's skip ahead here to Dr. Frances Widdowson, very interesting professor here. She's a free speech advocate, she really is, and gets into some hot water about this. She was scheduled to speak at the University of Lethbridge. I believe the topic was academic freedom, and they canceled that, but I think she went forward and tried to do this anyway, and then that caused all kinds of chaos. There's a reaction to that, right? And there was just recently a court hearing on this. So how did that go?
So Dr. Frances Widdowson was a tenured professor at Mount Royal University, and although she was tenured, they somehow managed to fire her over not embracing and in fact rejecting the dominant narrative on Aboriginal issues, Aboriginal rights. She just takes she has different opinions that are not mainstream. And so the Justice Center is funding lawyers to sue the University of Lethbridge over, frankly, breaking its contract with taxpayers to uphold free speech on campus for not even following its own mission. So that the court hearing was last week. The decision will be rendered in the weeks ahead.
Okay.
But we're holding this taxpayer-funded university whose purpose is to facilitate the quest for truth, which can only be done through honest inquiry, frank debate, honest discussion. And universities across Canada are kind of spitting in the face of taxpayers by not fulfilling their obligations to facilitate free speech on campus.
Yeah, and Alberta, I know, put some legislation in place saying, hey, universities, you need to allow free speech here. And I think that was with the stipulation of, if not, we're going to police this and withhold some funds. Has anything happened with that at all? Because, this is, like you say, happening across Canada, but here in Alberta as well, it's ongoing where we're seeing these things. Somebody wants to speak freely and we're saying, no, not this time.
The government has not gone further beyond good intentions. They have good intentions. I think they believe in free speech, but there's no legislation that has been amended, to my knowledge, that expressly says taxpayer-funded universities must uphold campus free speech as a condition for getting billions of tax dollars from Albertans. They have no province, to my knowledge, has gone so far. That too would be a very simple legislative amendment that clarifies, but so far they don't seem to have the backbone or the spine to proceed.
Yeah, I wish they did. I mean, essentially what's happening in our university, it seems, is that we're teaching students that, the DEI, right? Diversity, equity, oh my goodness, inclusion. So so we do that as long as you agree with me. But that's not diversity. So if somebody disagrees with you, now we have some diversity. If somebody, disagrees with you, then you have to express some tolerance. Otherwise, you don't have to. You include those people who disagree with you, but if they agree with you, there's no need to include them. They're already included. So we're missing the entire point. So we're raising a generation of people who go into society thinking that's DEI. When the person I'm working with disagrees with me, then I should shut him down, right? I mean, these become our teachers, our politicians, our lawyers, et cetera, our business owners. That's not a healthy place to be. That's basically totalitarianism, is it not?
It's a neo-Marxist doctrine of group warfare. The old Marxists said that we should always be in a state of war, the capitalists versus the workers. The new Marxists, they say that we should always be, it's group rights, and groups should be at war with each other. Society is a perpetual war of men versus women, gay versus straight, light-skinned people versus dark-skinned people. We should all be at war against each other until someday, the oppressed groups defeat the oppressor groups, and it's never ending. And that's the new Marxism, and it's thoroughly entrenched at pretty much every university in Canada.
Yeah, and so if you follow that through, what's going to happen in the next couple of decades, right? It's going to get worse, not better, unless something changes in how we, do universities and education. It's so crucial. Let's touch on the case of Philip Nisimov, another former university student from Ontario this time. Courts considering whether personal religious beliefs qualify for protection from vaccine mandates. I think this goes back to like 2021, something like that, during the COVID time.
Yeah, the courts thus far have been writing the media narrative into their court rulings and not looking at the evidence. If they looked at the evidence, they would know that the COVID was a serious threat to a small percentage of Canadians, but it was not a serious threat to the majority of the population. If they looked at the evidence, they would know that the vaccine did not prove to be effective. People who got injected, they still got sick with COVID. They still died of COVID. They still spread COVID to other people. It was not effective. There was no long-term safety data. And it's just horrific how the courts sided with governments over and over again by just writing the media narrative into their court rulings. So this case, maybe we are far enough away from it in time, I hope. It's been 5 years, that maybe the courts will take a more objective look at the evidence in this case.
Okay.
I hope.
Any idea when that outcome will be made public?
No, the courts typically, they reserve judgment, which means that you will get a ruling in 2 months or 6 months or 10 months. Okay. It's never, you never know ahead of time.
Okay, we'll wait on that one. But that's really important stuff. It is. Again, it seems like religious rights always fall to the bottom of the human rights pile, right? And they should have equal weight with other rights as well. Who even makes the decision as to whether a religious belief is sincerely held, right? And on what basis would they make that decision?
Well, typically courts will accept that there's a sincerely held religious view.
Okay.
Where they go sideways is that the Charter Section 1 allows judges to uphold violations of charter rights and freedoms. And so judges that are really following the media narrative and becoming full of fear because they've been told hundreds and hundreds of times that COVID is going to be like the Spanish flu of 1918, which it wasn't. The fear-filled judges have tended to uphold the government measures, which the governments themselves admit are violations of our charter freedoms. Governments admit that, but then they say, well, it's justified because, scary crisis and, this and that.
Yeah, public safety. Well, when the numbers get manipulated, I guess, things happen, right? And you deal with that actually in your book, Corrupted by Fear, actually deals with a lot of that stuff. Some very, very good stats and research in that book. So check it out, Corrupted by Fear. I think it's available on Amazon. Let's touch on Bill C-22 if we could. Government says, hey, this is a bill that's going to keep our public safe, right? Enables law enforcement, even national security agencies like CSIS, to gather digital evidence and investigate crimes. So nothing to worry about, folks. But you're saying, well, let's look at the devil's in the details here, and there are some things to be concerned about, right?
Yeah, Bill C-22 is one of several bills that chips away at the privacy rights of Canadians, our right to be free from surveillance, so that the government has no business in the bedrooms of the nation or the living room or the kitchen or anywhere else. We have a right to be free from surveillance. That's an important part of democracy. Every dictator, tyrant in history has loved engaging in surveillance, right, by tapping telephones and reading the mail and listening in on people, informers, and so on. And so we have a heritage in Canada that's being threatened, a heritage of government respecting our privacy, respecting our property rights, and law enforcement cannot violate our privacy unless they go to court to obtain a warrant. And in order to obtain the warrant, they have to persuade the court that they have reasonable and probable grounds that an individual has committed a crime or is committing, whatever, child pornography, terrorism, what have you. When they get the warrant, only then can they bust into somebody's house. Only then can they install a listening device. Only then can they start reading a person's emails. It has to be with court order. So with C-22 and other legislation, it chips away at that traditional need for police to get a warrant.
So they can do this without a warrant then?
They still, it's complicated, right? There's all these bills and there's all these different situations, but in some situations, like for Canada Post, for example, one of the bills before Parliament would give Canada Post the right to read letter mail without a warrant from the court.
Wow.
There's an example of one of the bills before Parliament right now.
That's a bit scary, yeah. Okay. Trust us, right? Well, I'm not sure I do. And again, this gives access, much easier access to, the electronic, internet service providers, right? And that personal data, they can keep that for, I think, a full year. And I don't know what kind of accountability there is that, how do we know for sure that they're going to get rid of that in a year, or do they hang on to it forever? I don't know.
Well, another bill, Bill C-8, would give the federal cabinet the power to kick individual Canadians off the internet, which is really frightening. They can do that without warning, without notice, without an opportunity to defend yourself. They can order a service provider to kick Paul Arthur or John Carpay or anybody else off the internet. They could do that if Bill C-8 passes. And then Bill C-22 would allow the government to snoop on all of our phone calls and emails and texts within the past year. Where were we? With whom? How often? All this information that the government would have access to. So this is scary. I mean, we're looking towards a full-on becoming like the communist China with a social credit system, where if you criticize the government on Facebook, you will find yourself unable to board a plane or hop onto a bus or take the subway.
Yeah, and it sounds exaggerated, but this happened during the Freedom Convoy. People had their bank accounts frozen. Tell that to those people. Could it happen? Well, it did. Can it happen again? Well, bring on the next world crisis, and guess what? It'll happen. At least I'm convinced there's a very, very good chance it would happen here in Canada. That's the trend that we've seen here. You've got a petition as well. Do you want to tell people about your petition against Bill C-22?
Yeah, our website, www.jccf.ca, so Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. We have petition there against Bill C-22, which is a great threat to our privacy. And if it passes, it's kind of like a building block. They're putting these building blocks in place, which together are going to facilitate this surveillance state where the government will know everything about you at all times. That's the direction we're going in. It's up to Canadians to contact their MP and say, no, we don't want this.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is true. It's a little by little. It's, again, boiling the frog, right? Little by little, and then it's too late, right? So any advice for our viewers here as to, again, what can we do to oppose or counter this attack on our freedoms, our basic freedoms?
Well, continue to support independent media like Bridge City News, right. And there's other outlets. It's so important because the CBC and CTV Global, all of these government-funded outlets, and it's not just the CBC that's government-funded, it's Global and CTV and so many others get our tax dollars. It's okay to listen to them as well, but if that's your only source of media, you're not getting properly informed about what's going on in the country. So support independent media is important. Sign up to the Justice Center newsletter to keep up to date on what's happening. Sign petitions, talk to your MP, and be involved in the democratic process.
I'm out of time. I've got to leave it there, John. Appreciate all that you folks do here fighting for freedom. All right, again, jccf.ca. Thank you for watching, and I encourage you to pray for our country as well. And you can check out all of our episodes at WizeUp.ca.